Welcome to Priyam Technologies. I am Venkat. This is part 106 of ASP.NET video series. In this video, we'll discuss about adding custom events to user controls. This will enable us to understand events and delegates much better. To get the most out of this video, I would strongly recommend to watch parts 104 and 105 from the ASP.NET video series and parts 36 to 39 from the C# video series. I have included the links for the ASP.NET and C# video series here for your convenience. Now, most people actually feel events and delegates are a complex subject and they are difficult to understand. I'll try my best to make these concepts as simple as possible, but trust me, if we get the basics right, events and delegates are not really that difficult to understand. There are two very important points to keep in mind when designing events and delegates. Now, delegates are function pointers and their syntax is very much similar to that of a function, whereas events are variables of type delegates with an event keyword in front of them. Now, if these points are not very clear at the moment, don't worry, they'll be much clearer as we progress in this video. In the previous session, we have designed this calendar user control, which is a very simple user control. Now, as the control stands at the moment, it doesn't have any custom event. So this is the control that we have designed. If you look at this, the implementation of this control, this is pretty simple and straightforward. If you haven't watched the previous sessions, I would strongly encourage you to do so before continuing with the session. All this user control has at the moment is this custom property, and we have seen how to retrieve that custom property on the web form where we are using this calendar user control. So when I click this button, within the button click event, what we are doing, we are retrieving the selected date, and that's the custom property that we have created within the calendar user control, and then printing the date that the user has selected. Okay, now in this video we want to create an event for the calendar user control. Okay, now what event do we want to create? Now look at this. Whenever I click on this image button, the visibility of the calendar changes. If it's visible, it becomes hidden. If it's hidden, it becomes visible. And along the same lines, when I select a date, now the calendar is visible. When I select the date, as soon as I select the date, the calendar becomes invisible. So the calendar visibility is changing within this user control. So whenever the calendar visibility is changing within the user control, I want to raise a calendar visibility changed event. Okay, now this is in line with the standard ASP.NET drop-down list control, for example. Now within the drop-down list, whenever you change a selection, drop-down list selection changed event is raised. So along the same lines, whenever the visibility of the calendar changes within the calendar user control, we want to raise calendar visibility changed event. Let's see how to do that. Now there are 5 simple steps to raise a custom event from a control. Obviously, the first step is to create this class, calendar visibility changed event arguments class. For short, we are calling it args. Now, this class is going to contain the event data. Okay, now this may not be very clear at the moment, but don't worry, as we progress again in this video, you're going to understand the purpose of this class. This is going to be a very simple class. Okay, so this is called calendar visibility changed event args class, and we'll also understand the reason for this naming convention, calendar visibility changed event arguments. Okay, we'll understand why we are naming it in such a way. Okay, now let's go ahead and create this class. Now I'm going to create this class. Usually in reality we will have a separate file for that class, but for simplicity's sake, I'm going to create this class within the user control file itself. So I already have this class, so I'm going to minimize that and then create this class. So public class calendar visibility changed event args. Now this class is going to contain the calendar visibility changed event data. Now what data will this event going to contain? The calendar visibility changed event. Okay, it will contain true or false. If the calendar is visible, it returns true. Otherwise, it returns false. Obviously, to hold that visibility data, we need a Boolean field. So I'm going to have a Boolean field within this class. So private Boolean, and I'm going to call that is calendar visible. Okay, so that's the private field. Now to expose this private field to the external world, we need a public property. So I'm going to create that. So public Boolean, I'm going to call that is calendar visible. and this is only going to be a read-only property, so it's going to have only the get accessor. So whatever is the value that is going to be present in this private field, that will be returned by this property. So return this dot is calendar visible. Okay, a private field, and to expose that private field to the external world, we have a public property. And then obviously we need to initialize this private field somehow. So I'm going to have a constructor for the class which will initialize that field. So I'm going to say public. A constructor will have the same name of the class, so I'm going to copy that, and then into the constructor we will pass whether if the calendar is visible or not. So is calendar visible? Now we will use that incoming parameter into the constructor to initialize our class private field. So this dot underscore is calendar visible is equal to whatever field that's coming into the constructor. So a very simple class. This class is going to contain our event data, whether if the calendar is visible or not. So this property will return true if the calendar is visible, otherwise it will return false. And this constructor is used to initialize whenever the event occurs. We will create an instance of this class and pass that wherever it has to be passed. You will understand that in a bit. So a very simple class which is going to contain our event data. That's step 1. Okay, now let's look at what step 2. Step 2, create calendar visibility changed event handler delegate. So we are coming to delegates now. So what's a delegate? Now from this point, if you look at this, delegates are function pointers, and their syntax is very much similar to that of a function. And why do we use delegates? Now let's see one of the main purposes of delegates. Okay, now on this web form, if you look at this, I have the standard ASP.NET button control. Now this button control has this button click event. Now one of the main purposes of delegates is to hook up event handlers with events of controls. Now there are 3 things here to understand. You have the control itself, which is the button, and the button has the click event, and then obviously when that event occurs, there is a method which is handling that event, which is nothing but button1 underscore click. Okay, now how do we hook up this event handler button1 underscore click 1 with button click event? That is done with the help of a delegate. So button1 dot click, look at that, that's the click event. You can see the symbol as well, the lightning bolt symbol. So button dot click, and then to hook up this event handler, look at this, to hook up the button1, this event handler, with the click event of the button1 control, we are using this event handler delegate. This is actually the delegate. Look at this, the way we are hooking it up using plus equals. So we are registering this method with the click event of the button1 control using this event handler. So what is this event handler? Let me right click on that and go to definition. Now look at this. This is actually a delegate. Okay, so this delegate, now look at what we are passing to the constructor of this delegate. We are passing the name of the function. So this delegate will be pointing to this function. Whenever this event occurs, this method is automatically invoked. Okay, and how are we doing that? Using plus equals and a delegate. And now if you actually look at that event handler delegate, look at that, that's the event handler. And if you look at the event handler delegate, look at the signature. It looks very much similar to that of a method. A method will have a return type. In this case it's void, and then it is taking 2 parameters. One is of type object and the other one is of type event arguments. Okay, and then look at that, it has a delegate keyword in front of it. So a delegate are function pointers, and their syntax is very much similar to that of a function. The only difference between the function syntax and delegate syntax is that a delegate will have a delegate keyword and it ends with a semicolon, whereas a function will have a function body and it will not have a delegate. Now since delegates are function pointers, the delegate will have a signature and the function will have a signature. If this delegate has to point to a function, then the delegate signature has to match, or the function signature has to match that of the delegate. So look at this function, it has void and it takes these 2 parameters, object and event args. okay, and the delegate signature matches with that. Okay, so similarly we need a delegate, basically to point to hook up our event to every event handler method. So that's the reason why we need to create a delegate. So the next step is to create a delegate, and look at the name that we are using, calendar visibility changed event handler. Now if you look at this here, it says generic, event handler, just event handler. Now if we use this delegate, then our event cannot have any data within that. So if your event doesn't have any data, then we can use this generic event handler. But then the event that we are going to raise is going to contain a boolean flag, a boolean data, true or false. True if the calendar is visible, otherwise false. So we need to have that event data. So if that's the case, we need to have our own delegate. And then just to match up with MSDN naming convention, I'm going to call this calendar visibility changed event handler. Okay, so let's go ahead and create that. So let's create a delegate calendar visibility changed event handler. So again, a delegate is a function pointer. Its signature is very much similar to that of a function. So a function will have an access modifier, a delegate will have an access modifier. So public, and it's going to be void, and I'm going to call this calendar visibility changed event handler. And then this needs to have two parameters. Now look at the delegate of the the Microsoft event handler delegate. It's having object sender and event args. I'm going to copy that and paste that here, but then I don't want to use this event args class. That's because my event is going to contain some additional event data. So I'm going to use my class that we have created here, calendar visibility changed event args. And another thing that I have forgot to mention is, since this is going to contain event data, it's a very good practice to make it inherit from event arguments class. Okay, because this is the common the base class which provides all that functionality to this class. And then now, so to capture that event data, I'm going to use this object instead of the generic event args. Okay, and then I'm going to call this, I'm going to put it a delegate keyword here. So this makes it as a delegate. So I have a delegate now. So that's the second step. Now what's the third step? Create calendar visibility changed event. So this is most important. Now what are events? Events are nothing but they are variables of type delegates with an event keyword in front of them. Now just imagine if we want to create an integer variable, how would we do that? All we do is int I is equal to whatever. So I is a variable of type integer. So if I say int I is equal to 10, then I is a variable of type integer. Okay, so now we are saying an event is a variable of type delegate with an event keyword in front of it. So we already have a delegate here. Now I want to create an event. Okay, now this event, we want that to be raised from this calendar user control. So you have to create that event inside the calendar user control. But look at this. This class is created outside of that calendar user control because this is a class by itself. Okay, and then this is a delegate. Again, delegates are types, just like classes and interface. They are reference types. Okay, so they exist on their own. They, you don't have to create them inside the calendar user control class. But then an event belongs to a class, so the event has to be inside that calendar user control class. So let me expand this calendar user control class and then create our event. So what is an event? An event is a variable of type delegate. So how do we create a variable of type delegate? So I'm going to create public, and if you're creating an integer variable, you will say public int I, but I'm not going to create a variable of type integer. Instead, I'm going to create a variable of type calendar visibility changed event handler delegate. So I'm going to call that calendar visibility changed event handler, and I'm going to call the event as calendar visibility changed. So this is a variable of type this delegate. Now if you want to make that an event, what all you do is prefix an event keyword there. That's it. So we have the event created. That's the third step. Create calendar visibility changed event. And what's the fourth step? Now I'm not going to talk about the fourth step right now. We'll come back to that in just a bit. Now the final step is to actually raise the event. So how do we raise the event? That's another important thing to keep in mind. And when do we raise when do we raise this event? Whenever the visibility of the calendar is changed. And when does the visibility of the calendar changes? There are two ways in which the calendar visibility changes. Whenever we click the image button, or whenever we select the date within the calendar. Okay, so during both the cases we want to raise this particular event. So how do we raise that event? So where is the calendar visibility changing? Whenever the user clicks the image button within that calendar user control. And how do we raise this event? To raise the event, look at this. Whenever the calendar visibility is changed to false, now the first thing to raise the event is we have to create an instance of this class, because this class is going to contain the event data. Now look at this. When we raise the event, to the event handler method we have to pass the event data, whether the calendar is visible or invisible, and this class is capable of holding that data. Okay, so let's create an instance of this class before we raise that event. Calendar visibility changed event args, and I'm going to call that visibility changed event data, just trying to give it a meaningful name. And then look at the constructor. It takes a boolean parameter, whether stating whether the calendar is visible or not. We have just turned the visibility of the calendar false, so I'm going to pass false into that constructor. So what's going to happen now? This object is created, and all we need to do right now is to raise the event. So how do we raise the event? What is the name of the event that we have created? Calendar visibility changed event. To raise the event, all you do is you call that calendar visibility changed event. Look at the symbol. We got the lightning bolt symbol indicating that it's an event. And we are raising who is raising this event? This user control is raising, calendar user control is raising this event. So that's the sender. So that's why I use this keyword here, because this class, an instance of this class, will raise the event. For example, when I drag and drop this calendar user control on a web form, we get calendar user control 1. So that's an instance of this class. So basically this class is raising the this event, calendar visibility changed event. So sender will be this class, and then what is the next parameter that we have to pass? The calendar visibility changed event arguments data, event data, and we have a class of that type. Now it should be clear now why we have created this class in step 1, because when we raise the event we want to pass the event data to that event. Okay, so that's the reason why we have created this class. So I'm going to pass that object to that event. That's it, we are actually done. Okay, but then an important thing, there are two things to make this class look much better that we have to do. The first thing is you have to really check if before we raise the event, we have to check if the event is null or not null. Now why do we have to do this null check? Don't worry about this. We are going to talk about this in the next video session when we'll discuss about actually consuming this event on a web form later. Okay, so about this condition don't really worry. So that's the first change we have to do. Another change is we don't want to be raising events directly like this. Okay, another better way of raising this event is actually by using fourth step. Create a protected virtual method to raise the event. And I'll tell you in a minute why we have to do that using a method indirectly rather than doing it directly like this. Now doing it directly like this is not wrong, but then it will be much better if we actually create a protected virtual method to raise that event. Okay, so let's do that. So instead of raising the event like this directly, I'm going to create one simple protected virtual method within this calendar user control class. So I'm going to call this protected virtual, and it's going to be void, and I'm going to call this method, just to be so calendar visibility changed is the event. So I'm going to call this method on calendar visibility changed method. So that's the name of the method. And this method, since we have to pass, when we are raising the event, we will pass this event data. So that will be the argument, a parameter that's coming into this method, or you can simply say as e. Okay, so now this method will take the responsibility of raising the event. So if calendar visibility changed, that's the name of the event. So let me copy that, it's a long name. If calendar visibility changed is not equal to null. Okay, now again, don't worry, why are we checking for this null? As I told you, we'll be talking about that in the next video session when we actually consume this event. And then what will this do? This will just raise that event. So this class is raising the event, so I use this keyword, and then we pass an instance of this, whatever parameter that is coming into this method. Okay, so I'm going to use this protected method to raise the event. I'll explain why we are using this method and not going to do it directly like this in just a bit. Okay, first let me complete the implementation. So instead of this line, I'm just going to call that method now. On calendar visibility changed. So let's go ahead and call that. So on calendar visibility changed, all we have to pass to this now is that visibility changed event data. So I'm going to pass that there, and along the same lines, let's copy these lines. Whenever the visibility is changed to true, at that point of time we want to change that to true. Okay, so whenever the image button is clicked, we are raising that event. And there is another case when we have to raise the event. Whenever the selection in the calendar changes, we retrieve the selected date, populate the text box, and we are immediately turning the visibility to false. So even in this case, I want to raise that event. So I'm going to copy that there and then raise that event. Paste it here. And as soon as we turn the visibility to false, what we are doing, we are also raising that event. So we are passing in false. So that's it. We are done. Okay, now let's understand why we are doing this. Why didn't we, actually directly raise the event itself? That's because notice the signature of this method, the on calendar visibility changed method. It's a protected virtual method. Protected meaning this method is going to be available for any class that's going to derive from this calendar user control. And also, this method is marked virtual, meaning the derived class can actually override the implementation of this method. And why is it important and useful for the derived classes? Because let's say I have a class, I'm going to have maybe special calendar user control class or something like this. Public, let's call it as, let me show you practically. So public class, let's call this special calendar control or something like that, and this one is going to inherit from that calendar user control class. Okay, if that's the case, now since this method is a protected virtual method, now this method can be overridden in this derived class, right? So if I just type override keyword, and then if I select whatever is the method on, we should see our method on calendar visibility changed. Look at that. Okay, so I'm overriding on calendar visibility changed method. Now here, look at this. The event in this, if I'm using this special calendar control class anywhere else, instead of using calendar user control, now in this class I can, the event, the visibility, calendar visibility changed event will be raised only when this line is executed. Now before that I can actually do whatever I want. Before raising the event I can do some additional work. So that's the advantage of using a protected virtual method to raise the event rather than raising it directly. It makes your derived classes more flexible. you can change them the way you want. You can create specialized versions of this calendar user control. So we are just kind of keeping future in mind and designing our events. That's why always whenever we raise events, we create a protected virtual method so that the child classes can do some additional work before they actually raise the event. Okay, so those are all the changes that we need to do. So if we quickly recap, create this class which is going to contain our event data, okay, and create this delegate, because we hook up event handlers to events using delegates. And what are events in the first place? Events are variables of type delegates with an event keyword. So we need a delegate to create an event. So create the delegate, then create the event, and then use a protected virtual method to raise the event rather than directly raising it. And we have understood the reason why we have to do it that way. And finally, raise the event itself. And how are we raising that event? Using that protected virtual method on calendar visibility changed. So we are calling that method, passing in the event, the object that's going to contain the event data. With all this, let's go ahead and compile this solution. So build solution, build succeeded. Now on my web form, I already have, the calendar user control. So at this point, I should be able to, what is the ID of the calendar user control? Calendar 1. And look at this, when I put in there and press dot, we should see the event there. Calendar visibility changed event. Look at the symbol, lightning bolt symbol. In the next video session, we'll actually discuss about two things. What is how to consume this calendar visibility changed event. And then we'll also understand the reason of checking for null before raising the event. So if you remember, calendar user control, in this virtual method which we are using, we are actually checking if calendar visibility changed not equal to null. Only then we are raising this event. Okay, what would happen if we don't check for null and directly raise the event? We'll talk about this in our next video session. On this slide, you can find resources for ASP.NET, C# and SQL Server interview questions. That's it for today. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.